So yeah, hello, and thanks a lot for joining us today, and thanks a lot to Jibambe and all their organizers and partners for having me. I'm TATIANA VILELA dos SANTOS. I'm a game designer and artist based in Paris. That's where my accent comes from. And for the next 60 minutes or so, I'm gonna talk about my work, which is also my passion, and that is alternative controller games, also known as ALT control, which at this point we'll define as video games played with weird gamepads. This is gonna be a general introduction to the ALT control world. The point is to discuss in the second half of the session. So before we start, just a quick disclaimer. Videos on Zoom are often very laggy or buggy, and I'm going to show you some. The quality should be enough for you to understand what's happening, but at the end of the workshop, probably later in the afternoon, I'll post links to every videos I've shown on these two networks that you can see displayed on your screen right now. Okay, let's get started. So here is the last game I designed and developed. It's titled Love Songs. It's a sort of riddle game played with a metallophone and with a strange LED sculpture. And this is an example of what we could call an alternative controller game or a playful installation.
Vincenzo, can you hear me?
So kind of weird, I guess, but I haven't always done this. 10 years ago, in 2010, I was more of a traditional game designer. I was working on an iPad game with a small French company called Ispad. It was my first job in the game industry, and it was quite a challenge as the iPad was just released. And I had to come up with ideas for games to be played on this new platform. I had to explore the possibilities offered by this new technology. And I fell in love with it, with this challenge. So I decided to specialize in game design for new technologies to keep on exploring the uncharted territory offered by these technological oddities, let's say. So I started working as a freelancer on projects with new technologies, which led me to design and develop games for Leap Motion, which is a hand and fingers motion capture device, and then virtual reality, but also much more exotic technologies like humanoid robots. Most of my freelance works back then were done for events organized by big companies like car brands, game companies, telecommunication companies, banks, sport competitions. Yeah. And for some of them, I had to design a whole interactive installation. So here is an example of what it can look like.
This October, Singapore hosted the BNP Paribas WTA Finals for the first time. The 8 top WTA tennis players from around the world gathered in the brand new Singapore Sports Hub. For this special occasion, the innovative bank wanted to offer something different to its VIP clients. Not just a way to connect with each other, but an immersive digital experience that would highlight its long-term commitment to tennis through the We Are Tennis by BNP Paribas brand. We created a new way to play tennis. A digital tennis game with futuristic gameplay using Leap Motion technology. Guests were invited to register when they joined BNP Paribas Hospitality Suite, sharing their LinkedIn details. Then, they were challenged by a fellow VIP to a virtual tea break match in 7 points, just like a tennis tiebreak. They didn't need to bring a racket. Players could use their hands to exchange tennis shots, using Leap Motion technology to capture gestures and translate them digitally on the tennis screen. During the fully immersive experience, we heated up the competition with bonus rounds and unexpected obstacles. At the end of each game, players were invited to connect, They could exchange their contact details by virtually signing their signature on the table, and their LinkedIn details were shared. Over 7 days, we helped more than 1,500 BNP Paribas VIP clients to connect with a virtual tea break. Through this experience, BNP Paribas demonstrated its passion for innovation and commitment to first-class hospitality. We Are Social delivered a campaign that would help We Are Tennis by BNP Paribas unleash new ways to enjoy tennis through new technologies.
So, as you can tell, this was my corporate work. But in 2013, in parallel with my freelance work, I started making my own game installations and getting paid to exhibit them in festivals and other cultural events. Actually, the Amaze Festival, one of Jibambe Tech partners, was one of the first festivals to trust me and exhibit my work. I'll forever be grateful for that. And so, yeah, progressively, I started to get paid enough to earn a living out of my works. But it's when I made Atsuno that things really started to take off for me professionally as an indie creator. And so, yeah, Atsuno is a cooperative game for 2 players. Players have illuminated push buttons strapped to their arms, legs, and belly, and they have to press all delete buttons on their partner's body simultaneously to win a round. So it's kind of like an electronic twister played on other people's body, I guess. Well, here is a video. So this kind of work is part of an artistic and game design movement we call the ALT CTRL movement. The name comes from the GDC, the Game Developers Conference in San Francisco. They launched a new exhibit space, I think in 2014, that they called the ALT CTRL GDC, dedicated to this kind of game. And the name kind of stuck. That's all for the name. And in this movement, there are other creators like me, people like Robin Baumgarten, Phoenix Perry, Jerry Bellish, Helen Cook. We have Alistair H. Jason, Enrique Llagostera, Jess Marcotte, and that's just to mention a few of them. But one of the most famous games in the movement is probably Line Wobbler by Robin Baumgarten. And I will let its creator talk about his own game.
What would be the strangest thing a game could be made from? An Arduino, an LED strip, a bit of wood and a doorstop has got to be up there. Here's how it came about.
I came up with the idea for Line Wobbler when I was watching a YouTube clip about a cat playing with a door stopper. So this is actually a door stopper in the joystick, and the cat was kind of wobbling it back and forth, and I said, wow, this is kind of a cool mechanic, and the cat was really enjoying it. So I said, well, humans would enjoy this as well. So it took me a while to figure out how to correctly measure if it's wobbling and how fast. So then I figured it out, and it's like an acceleration sensor in the top. And so this is the core of the game. And
you made this for the game jam?
I made it for a game jam, yeah. So in the 48-hour game jam, we made it from scratch, and they also had these LED strips lying around there. So I said, hey, let's combine the two. So then basically this game came to be fairly quickly.
Yeah.
And in the game, you kind of control the green dot, and you move back and forth with the spring controller, and you have to fight these enemies, which are dotted out throughout the levels. And if you touch them, it said you kind of die in a colorful explosion. So what you want to do when you get close, you wobble the spring, just like the cat does, and you try to beat all the enemies. And yeah, there's like 10 different levels with different obstacles. Later on, there's kind of lava as well, and there's a big boss fight in the end. So the game is quite hard, so it's kind of a one-dimensional, super hard game, and yeah, I'm quite happy how it turned out.
So there we have it, Line Wobbler. It's been nominated as a finalist for the Indiecade 2015 awards, and rightly so. We wish Robin all the best of luck.
So, as I said, the name ALT Control is quite recent, but designing games with weird interfaces is not new. Back in 2001, the artistic German duo of artists, I don't know how to call them, but yeah, they're a duo of artists that's called Fur. They did this incredible installation that maybe you've heard of. It's called the Paint Station. And that would certainly qualify as an ALT Control or a game installation. I think it's worth having a look at Paint Station.
Boah, nee, das ist... Ich bin noch dabei!
So yeah, it's a game that hurts the players when they lose. You will see later that it's something Fur likes to do. So yeah, as you can see so far, ALT Control is often referring to artisanally made gamepads, or at least interfaces. And well, first, if these games with handmade controllers interest you, there's a website listing lots of them that's called Shake That Button. And I will invite you later to have a look at it. But artisanal games is not all the ALT Control game design has to offer. If we define alternative controller games as games played with an interface challenging the standards for a gamepad, then we can say that ALT Control is as old as game consoles, in the sense that it's almost as old as when we started to get standard controllers, really. And I'd say there are 9 main sectors where ALT Control game design is relevant nowadays. Some of them can cross. There can be some porosity between those sectors. I will quickly present you all the sectors. The first one is the one we already talked about. It's the artistic field. It can be more or less close to the interactive art field. Those are games that are exhibited and their creators will be paid for the exhibit. These games can be made in art residencies, not all the time, but often. And an art residency is when a cultural place gives you funds, spaces, sometimes even materials to build an installation or any work of art. But some of those are made in game jams like Lion Wobbler or Atsuno, and will later grow into something bigger. The second sector is the game industry, of course, and the gaming device industry. I think the first example that probably comes to people's mind is Guitar Hero. Personally, this game was my rabbit hole into ALT Control, but there are much more than Guitar Hero. Basically, Nintendo made it a specialty. They came up with the weirdest gaming gear for each of their consoles. You may have heard of the Power Glove, and if not, well, you need to hear about this. So it was made in 1989 for the Nintendo Entertainment System.
The Power Glove for your NES. Now you and the games are one. The Power Glove. Everything else is child's play.
See the Power Glove in the hot new movie The Wizard, starring Fred Savage.
But this is not the weirdest thing Nintendo came up with. They made really weird gears for a Game Boy, like Pedicedate, the one on the top left corner. And that's a device plugged to the Game Boy that would sedate children to prepare them for dental surgery. You have at the bottom the Glucoboy, which was also connected to the Game Boy to test the blood sugar level of diabetic children. You had the Pocket Radar. It's a real fishing game with a sort of radar that detects fish near an actual fishing rod. And well, the Game Boy camera and thermal printer, and they did that for each of their console. Like the Wii also has its share of weird controllers. The third sector is the arcade industry. I guess some of you may have think of games like Dance Dance Revolution, of course, but yeah, if arcade is not as popular nowadays as it was in the 80s, it's still alive and kicking. Well, at least it's still alive, especially in Asia. Some of those have very original controllers, like Panic Park. It's a competitive game for 2 players. It's a sort of Subway Surfer with 2 controllers fixed on a rail, and players have to actually shove each other both in the digital and physical space to push their opponent out of the way, or this weird flipping table game that could legitimately be a meme. And a lot of those are also based on famous video game licenses like Monster Hunter and Dragon Quest. The fourth sector is gamified sports. It's been quite popular recently, especially with companies like Valomotion that you maybe heard of. It's probably the most popular one. They bust a few years ago with something called augmented climbing wall. Maybe you've seen this. Sorry. Up. So the fifth sector is the accessibility industry. I'm thinking of devices like the Xbox Adaptive Controller. It's a kit adapted to many different disabilities, but there are other gears on the market like the Quad Stick FPS. It's a controller entirely well controlled with the mouth, adapted to severe handicap and limb paralysis, and single-handed controllers like those made by Ben Heck. And then we have the event industry, where games can be part of a marketing event, like I showed you with virtual tiebreak, that is in this marketing industry, event industry. And then there is a lot of demand in the escape room industry. So I've been asked to make autonomous riddles for some of them. I've never been asked to make an entire escape room, but just to make one riddle for it to be, the point is to be distinguishable from the competition for them, because there are a lot of escape rooms right now. And this one I worked on, it was also part of a marketing event. As I said, those sectors can overlap sometimes. And this is what it looked like. And then there's the museum and exhibition space design sector, where all control games can be used, especially in exhibits for children, for example. There are places like La Cité des Sciences et de l'Industrie in France or Eureka in the UK, where these games are used as a fun way to teach children sciences, for example. And finally, it's kind of the unreachable grail, but still important to mention. There are amusement parks with at the top Imagineering, which is the research and development lab of Disney. And they are making games like the Buzz Lightyear experiences. It's basically a cross between a ride and a rail shooter. So there are much more sectors. There are other fields that I didn't mention where alternative controllers are relevant, but I didn't mention them because they are more confidential. I'm thinking of sectors like the tabletop game industry. If you're interested in this one specifically, you should check the world of les éditions volumiques, or the performing arts with creations like Cello Fortress. It's a game played with both standard gamepads and a cello. So this is a very shallow overview of these different sectors. My point is just to introduce you to those, hoping that you'll get curious about it. I could spend the rest of the workshop talking about these different sectors, their trends, their emergence, but I have other things to say, so we'll move on. And if you have any questions or comments about these fields, let's talk about it at the end. So yeah, the second part will be about interfaces, as you can tell. So as game designers, it can be a bit daunting to approach this specific type of game design. And if ALT control has a lot in common with traditional game design, it also has many other things in addition to it. The main one being how we use tangible interfaces in the experience we design. Indeed, traditional game controllers are aiming for usually ergonomics and adaptability. They are designed to be forgotten to the benefit of the digital space where the game is actually happening. So this is for traditional game and video game design. But with ALT control games, we can use controllers to provide a challenge. Playing Guitar Hero on an Xbox controller wouldn't be as fun and challenging as playing it with a guitar controller. And to tackle the integration of tangible interfaces in the game experience, I personally like to use tools coming from the HCI, Human Computer Interaction Studies. I think that they can come in handy. And usually a human machine interaction will happen this way. You have a user that will interact with a standard controller. It can be a keyboard, a mouse, a gamepad. And the point is to send an information to a computer that will, compute it and then speak back an outcome or a result of some sort through a render or feedback interface. It can be a screen or speakers. Basically, interfaces will translate to human language into something understandable by a computer and vice versa. So it's pretty much the same with two humans communicating through their computers. But with ALT control games, we will modify this loop to provide physical, mental, and or social challenges. These different categories of challenges come from the rational game design method, which is a game design method, as you can tell. And these categories are very useful in this case. So the modification of the loop will be else an addition of something to the loop, a removal of something to the loop, or the replacement of something in the loop, whether it is the replacement of an item of the loop, or a change in how we use something from the loop. it will be clearer with some examples. So here is Black Box. Black Box is a rhythm game I made a few years ago. It's played with a black truncated pyramid featuring massive push buttons on each side, forcing the player to make large gestures to play. So the controller is designed to provide a percussive experience to the player, but also due to the large gestures he has to make in order to play, it's also part of the challenge. If the game was played on a keyboard, players would have no difficulty playing the game. So this is an example of an alt control game where the controller has been replaced to provide a physical challenge. And for an example with mental challenges, here is GPU. So it's another game I made a few years ago. And in this game, players have to upload an image or a video at the beginning of the game, and the image will be glitched with shaders. Shaders are programs that alter the rendering of an image. And each glitch or shader will then be assigned to randomly to one of the buttons of this messy controller, and players then have to clear back the image by finding what button is assigned to what shader. And here, if the controller was aiming for ergonomics, each button would be labeled with the fixed shader it's associated with. But there would be no game if we did that. So this is an example where the controller, the way we change the controller provides a mental challenge to the players. And for the next example, I will first show you a video of the second first creation titled Leg Shocker.
When I was young, it's not my problem. It's not my problem. When I feel heavy metal, and I feel that I need what a lion I'm easy all of the time, but I'm never sure why I need you.
So in Leg Shocker, players play FIFA, the soccer game, with classic gamepads and on a common screen, but something has been added to the loop. There's this shin guard that has the opposite goal of a common shin guard. Here it features a sort of hammer that pounds away the player's shin whenever he gets tackled in the game. And this is an example where the addition of an element to the loop provides a mental challenge to the players. And to give you an example of a decremental approach, here is Tango. It's a game played without any visuals or sound. Here, players play with 5 small cushions, pillows, and each one is featuring an FSR. It's a pressure sensor and a vibrating motor. The more a cushion vibrates, the more the player must press hard on it. It's a sort of coordination game based on tactile sensations. And in this example, the removal of standard interfaces provides a physical challenge as the player can't rely on his eyes or ears anymore. So yeah, this was for Tango. And let's move on to examples of ALT control using standard controllers, but used in an uncommon way. Okay, ready?
Look at this. T.
Q.
I won. J.
Q, 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 Q.
P. No.
No.
Q, 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 Q.
So in this game, Snailed It, interfaces are standard ones. There's a display and a keyboard, but there's not enough of them. When the game starts, there is this graph or a graph that is generated with a snail at its center. Every node near the snail will display a random letter, and pressing on the related key on the keyboard will bring the snail to this node. At the border of the graph, there are green, blue, and pink nodes, one for each player. And if a player brings the snail to an end of his color, he wins the game. But there's only one avatar and one keyboard for every player. So players have to kind of jostle over the keyboard to get the key. And here, the imbalance in the loop provides a physical challenge. I think one of the best examples of games featuring a sort of diverted use for a traditional controller is probably the most popular one, is probably Johann Sebastian Joust, that you may have heard of. It's made by Die Gute Fabrik, and well, their work is amazing. So a fun fact about Joust is that it looks a lot like a game played during Roman antiquity. Well, supposedly called, I think, the Candle game. I'm not sure of the English name for it. And it was a game where back in the Roman antiquity, at the beginning of a party, everyone lights a candle and holds it. And the point is to turn off the other player's candle and be the last one with a lit candle. And Joust is pretty much the same with PlayStation Move controllers. There is a twist, though, that there is some music that's played during the game. And when the music is slow, the controllers are much more sensitive. So running will cause you to lose. And when the music is fast, the controller is less sensitive, so you can be a bit more aggressive in your play. Players only have 2 types of feedback in this game, the LED of their controller and the vibration. when they enter the game, the controller will light up with a color, any color that's not red. And when they're about to lose, the controller will blink and vibrating pulses will be triggered. And when the game is lost, a long and strong vibration will be triggered and the controller will light up in red, I think, and then turn off. The addition of the vibration is necessary in this game, as most of the times players don't look at their controller as they are protecting it by holding it behind their back. So this was the first aspect of game design that is specific to ALT control, I guess. The second aspect of game design that is specific to game installation is the use of physical space. So we can use the way we stagger the interfaces in a room to provide challenges, of course. Picture playing a computer FPS with a keyboard that is 10 steps away from the mouse. But even more than that, as interfaces or the borders between the physical and digital space, we can design games while taking into account the porosity between these spaces. And for that, there's a nice tool that's called the Reality Virtuality Continuum. It was created by researchers Paul Milgram and Fumio Kishino in the mid-90s. So it's an old tool, but it's still very useful to think about ALT control games. This axis wasn't developed for video games, but can be easily repurposed for it. At one end of the continuum, we have games that aim for a maximum immersion of players into a digital world. So virtual reality is a good example for that. But I guess Omni would even more qualify for this. Not only does the player in Omni have a VR headset, but he's walking on an octodirectional pad that allows him to kind of walk in the virtual space. And most Omni games feature a main tool or controller, usually a gun, that reinforces even more the player's immersion. On the other end of the continuum, we have immersive rooms, for example, where a room is made kind of magical thanks to digital technologies. One of my favorite examples for this is a sort of escape game that is in the south of France, that's called Eco Squad, where you pilot a steampunk-ish submarine that have to face and players have to face giant squids or whatever Vernian creatures. So this was for the other end of the continuum. And then in the middle, you have augmented reality. So everyone knows, I guess, about it. We'll define it as adding a layer of something digital over the real, or over a form, a rendering of the real. The difference between the left part of the continuum and the right one is that in real environment and augmented reality, players are projecting themselves in the physical world, mentally, I mean, while the game is happening in the physical world, not in a digital simulation. So yeah, I think you all know what Pokemon Go is, I assume. Otherwise, we can talk about it later. And finally, on this continuum, we have the augmented virtuality. And this is what the term alternative control of video games should refer to in a proper sense. Here, there are games that happen in a digital space, simulating a world, but where an interface is augmenting the digital experience, mainly by working as a constraint. So yeah, we can think about games like Guitar Hero for this. One last thing I'd like to mention before starting the second part is the technical aspect. Second part of the workshop, sorry, is the technical aspect of all control games. In addition to the usual game design and game development tools, engines like Unity or Unreal modeling software like 3ds Max and so on, we have specific technologies and techniques we use to make these games. The first one is related to, the first ones are related to electronics. Obviously, we use a lot of electronics in all control games. And there are three main types of technologies we use regarding electronics: microcomputers, microcontrollers, and keyboard encoders. So what is the difference? Microcomputers are, well, as the name suggests, small computers, usually using a Linux distribution, although some can accept a Windows partition, I guess. And these are credit card size printed circuit boards with a CPU and memory. So basically everything you find on a motherboard. And you can add many components to it, like Ethernet plugs, HDMI ports, etc. These boards will allow you to compute information, so basically make operations, run a program, etc. And also to manage inputs like buttons, joysticks, sensors, among others, and also manage outputs, so LEDs, piezo buzzers, vibrating motors, etc., you name it. The most famous ones are the Raspberry Pi and the Banana Pi. Then there are microcontrollers. So microcontrollers are printed circuit boards, PCBs, that will also allow you to compute, to run a program, but with way more limited capacities. The most popular ones are Arduino boards. There are different models of Arduino boards, the Nano, the Uno, the Mega, the Leonardo. As you can tell, it's an Italian technology. And the difference between these models is mainly the size of their RAM, their memory, and the number of pins available on the board. And with the microcontroller, you can also manage inputs and outputs. And finally, we have the keyboard encoders. Keyboard encoders are the cheapest of all three types of board, and they only allow you to send key inputs to a computer. These PCBs are the ones found in arcade pads. You can find some online by looking for something like arcade kits or zero delay encoders. And they usually come in boxes with a bunch of arcade buttons and a joystick. If you want to try to make an alt control, this is a really good start for it. There's another popular keyboard encoder on the market that's working almost like a generic keyboard encoder, except it's optimized to avoid electrical loss. This board is the Makey Makey, maybe you've heard of it. So you can use it as a standard keyboard encoder by plugging buttons and joysticks to it, on it. But actually, anything conductive will work with this board. I'd be happy to show you how it works here in my place for real, if you want, in a few minutes when I stop talking. And finally, I can't talk about all controls technical aspect without mentioning machining and other things we do in Fab Labs. Machining will allow you to prepare vector files on your computer and feed it to a machine that will interpret this vector file and act upon a given material according to your creation, according to your vector file. The five main ones are CNC milling. So it's a milling machine that will, well, mill a material, usually wood. You have turning machines that will turn a material while a tool is applied to it. The difference between milling and turning is that in milling, the tool is moving and the material is static. In turning, it's the opposite. And also my favorite one, the one I use the most, the laser cutting. It's a laser that will cut and etch wood, cardboard, even sometimes metal and acrylic glass. And finally, embroidery machines that embroider a piece of cloth based on a digital illustration. Oh yeah, and of course, 3D printers that you probably already know, I guess. So there are other techniques that we use to make alt control games, but it depends more on what can be found in your local Fab Lab, and also it depends a lot on the designer's skills and interests, of course. So sculpting and molding is not that uncommon in the alt control field. There is even a whole branch of the movement based on playing with living things like paramecia through an electronic microscope looking into a petri dish. If you are curious about that, have a look at biotic games. We can talk about it later if you like, of course. And one final point before the end, a question that some of you may have raised during the presentation, I guess, and it's what about COVID-19? Exhibits of objects that require to be touched by a lot of people. Well, that's not exactly compliant with the safety measurements to mitigate the coronavirus propagation. So what do we do as alt control designers? And well, I don't have a perfect answer for that, of course, but I think there are two ways to approach the problem. One is to make games that indeed need to be exhibited, but that are still compatible with social distancing. So games that can be played while wearing a mask, and ideally that don't involve players touching anything. So games based on motion capture with devices like Kinect and Leap Motion, or with sound through a microphone, or based on eye tracking. I'm currently making an eye tracking game specifically for this purpose. And I know some alt control developers are also exploring the possibilities offered by foot operated controllers. And we can also make games that are controlled through players' personal devices, like their phones, but we are getting, I think, a bit further from actual alt control games here. Well, it depends on the game, I guess. The second way we can approach this problem is by making alt control games to play at home. So else by selling our controllers, but this requires us to massively produce it. And I assume we don't all have access to a factory. So the other way is to make games featuring a diverted use of standard interfaces. And this is what I will offer you to think about for the rest of this session. I created a game jam on itch.io that will start in less than an hour now, I guess. And I will show you this right now. So let me share you my screen up, share. Perfect. So yeah, in 2 hours actually. So as I said, I created this game jam for everyone to join. It will start in less than 2 hours now, and it will stay open for about a month. And anyone can join this online game jam. Of course, it's online. And that jam is called the Alt Control at Home Jam. And here is the goal of the jam. Let me read you the little description, not all of it, of course. So I invite you to offer players new unique experiences by diverting the way we use standard controllers, keyboards, mice, gamepads, or MIDI controllers. Come up with your best alternative use for standard controllers and express yourself through controllers, diversion, and detournement. Detournement is a French artistic movement from the past century rooted in satire and parody. On the Game Jams page, you'll find a bunch of examples of diverted use of standard controllers from gamepads, like with games like Button, another game from the Goethe-Fabrik, the company that made Joust. Let me show you how Button is played. Hey.
Down. Put it down. Controller down.
No, I'm fine.
Put it down. Put it down. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. No, 5. 5. Slow her up.
Oh, no.
Slow her up. Yeah. Slow her up.
No. 3, 2, 1, go.
Oh, man, shit.
But on the Game Jam page, you will also find examples of diverted use for keyboards, examples that are a bit brutal, like Bang Bang Revolution. Obviously, it's a game you play by banging your head on the keyboard. So yeah, I think you got the idea. You have to bang your head on the keyboard. That's pretty brutal. But there are also, I think, brilliant example. One I like a lot is Trackball Driver installation disc trailer. The trailer is the video, of course. The name is so long. It's quite a clever game, I think. And yeah, so this was for keyboards and gamepads, but you also have examples of games based on MIDI controllers, which is also a fun way to make a diverted use for a controller. And finally, examples of diverted use of smartphones and tablets. There's a company that is that used to make brilliant games. I'm saying used to because I think they are not up anymore. But they made those two games that were brilliant. Bounden for mobile. And the last example will be Fingal, Fingal, I'd say, for a tablet. So, yeah, thanks a lot for listening to me talking for so long. As I said, it's a very general overview just to introduce you to the alt control world. And well, I now suggest that we all think together about what could make a nice game for such a game jam, and which diversion of a standard controller would seem interesting to you as developers, designers, or creatives. And if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, I would love to chat with you on the subject.
Hi.
It's
Hi,
question
Tatiana.
time.
Hi, Tatiana.
I
Can
will
you hear me?
put back the camera. Yeah, absolutely. I will just put the volume up
Okay.
and
Good.
start the camera. Yep. Hi again.
Hi again. So, my first question is very important, yeah?
Okay.
What's the name of the dog behind you?
Of the dog, I don't have a dog.
Well, there's a dog that was barking all through.
Oh, maybe it's the neighbor's dog. I don't know about the neighbor's dog. I don't have any animals. I'm traveling too much to take care properly of a pet, unfortunately.
Okay, I really thought that you had a dog there.
No, it's the neighbor's dog, I guess. And you can hear that. So that's quite sensitive.
I was hoping he's a gamer as well.
I would love to make a game for a dog or with a dog, but no, not yet. One day, sure.
Okay, thank you so much for the workshop. It was so good.
Thank you.
And my first question is,
Sure.
out of all the alt control games, what's your favorite?
I don't know if I can say there as a favorite but that's a good question, because I can tell why some of them for me are not comparable. We cannot compare them. There are some alt control games that are mainly aiming for a fun experience to share with your friend, a party game, and there are some alt control games that are that have a lot of well, let's say they have a political message to share. They are socially engaged. I'm thinking about the work of Enrique Llagostera that it's one of the designers I talked about earlier, and his work is, well, socially engaged, so it's hard to compare it with, let's say, Button or Joust. I have to admit that I'm really into simple party game like Joust. It's really my thing.
How
But
does it
yeah,
play?
maybe one like this. Excuse me?
No, it's okay. Go ahead.
Okay. So yeah, maybe the party games like Johann Sebastian Joust, I'd say, but just as a consumer, as a player, not as a designer.
All right, cool. I have a question in terms of developers, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
So in Kenya, we have a place called Gearbox.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like this place for thinkers. They come in and they can build stuff, work with 3D printer, design a new phone, whatever that looks like. The challenge seems like not so many people can access. What would you think would be the initial things that you really require to make a place, a Fab Lab, really accessible and impactful?
So yeah, ALT control game design and development requires most of the time to have a Fab Lab or a sort of Fab Lab accessible. And the problem is, I'm very aware that it's not the case everywhere. Before the presentation, I had the curiosity to look at at the Fab Labs available in Kenya. Apparently there are some, but it's not like there are thousands of them. There are like, yeah, a few of them. We can count them on one hand. So I guess the best in this case is to do what I did, which is starting to work from home. There are plenty of materials that are not that expensive available online. I told you about keyboard encoders. A generic one will be, well, I guess not so expensive, but it's a matter of reference, I guess. But still, you can find some for not that much, maybe 5 or 6 euros. Sorry, I'm talking in euros, of course. And then I think it's actually, I would like to reverse the question in the sense that I think Fab Labs could use ALT control and weird game controllers as a way to teach how to use the machines in the lab. That's something I like to do in some of my workshops, because usually my workshops, of course, are not on Zoom. They are in Fab Labs or schools. And it's a really good way to actually introduce people to the machining, etc., everything you find in a Fab Lab, while still having a sort of production that you can show, put on display for other people to see. And it's a virtuous circle. In the sense that people will see the controllers, want to play them, will be interested in how they were made, maybe will come and make some, and then you have new controllers to show, etc. So that's for one part of the question. The other part was more technical, I guess, so that's how I took it. Like, what would be good for a Fab Lab to have to make these games? And I'd say the minimum would be laser cutting and a CNC, because with a CNC you can make 3D milling or turning, and with a laser cutter you can, well, cut a material, and that's actually enough. 3D printers are good, but that's not the machine we use the most, I think, in ALT control games.
Okay, a follow-up question to that. To what extent can you use scrap tech to build something?
You say the crap tech or craft tech?
Scrap, like
crap,
junk tech.
Shitty tech. Okay,
yeah,
got it.
Old computers that have been thrown away, all that.
Okay, it's actually a really good idea to use crappy tech to make ALT control. First, because you won't be too sad if it breaks, and let's admit it, when you start making ALT control games, expect it to break at some point. For Atsuno, the game with the buttons, the kind of twister on player's body, we had 6 playable prototypes. I'm not even mentioning the little prototype we made that were not really functional. We had 6 fully playable prototypes. 5 of them broke, and the last one is the one we have now that is pretty solid. But yeah, when you start, you need to accept that things will break. So reusing old computers, old parts is a really good idea. And it's actually a way to be creative. It's a really good, I really like to start with a technical constraint. So starting with what you have, like we have this shitty computer, what can we do with it? It's a really good creative approach to game design in general.
Great. In terms of online communities, because in Kenya we don't really have this, I've never seen it. It's so surprising for me to see things like Nailed It, Button, I mean Bang Revolution, which I think was inspired by a rock band and leg shocker. And to be honest, I think that I want to try out the augmented wall. That was really cool.
Augmented climbing wall, yeah.
Yes, I could trade that for the PS5, for sure. So what do you think, or can you recommend some people who for sure would love to be part of this, but since we don't have any in Kenya, are there any online communities you can recommend, places we can get info, maybe start up with our own small projects at home?
So that's a really good question, because it's actually what my next slide is about. So not so long ago, like a few weeks ago, I had the same observation as you. Even if in France and Germany, of course, we have the great chance, the great opportunity to have some festivals like the Amaze Festival. First, it's once a year, and the other festivals are elsewhere, and you cannot travel all the time. So even when you have the opportunity to go at a festival, to a festival that's near your place, it's happening only once a year. So we also have this problem. And so for that, I created a subreddit, a Reddit community that is ALT CTRL Games.
Nice.
This is where you will find it. We are not a lot of people for now. We are like 20 or so, but that's good. So if you come, we have time to actually give feedback, discuss any topic you want. So I really invite everyone that is interested in this field to join this community. It's a good way to start. Then there are, of course, more confidential stuff, but there is a Facebook group that's called ALT CTRL Hangouts, I think. If someone is interested in this, maybe leave a post on the subreddit, and I will answer with the prop name and a link to the Facebook group. And then, well, it's more like reaching out to different creators. So I will give you my social media links. If you have any question or would like to be in touch with someone, you can just send me a message and I'll do my best to answer quickly. But yeah, Reddit, I guess, is the best place for that right now online, when we are talking online places.
Okay, I have a question here. People would like to see how you look like. So maybe you can stop sharing your screen.
Oh, I've put the camera back on at the end of the presentation, so it's on right now.
Oh, nice. Can you guys see her? Ah, super duper.
Okay.
Oh, they still think you have the sharing thing because we can see your reddit.com.
Okay.
That's what they're really seeing.
Yeah, I can see behind you that the screen is displaying the name, but I can stop the presentation, stop sharing the presentation.
Great, that would be nice. Ah, there she is, guys. Okay, so you're a girl, and I'm sure that there are challenges that comes with being a girl in this space. In Kenya, we have very few gamers or game developers who are female. Is it the same in Europe? What are the things you're doing to try and make more females come into this space?
It depends on the field, but yeah, we still have less. Well, I'm teaching at university to game design students, and let's admit it, we usually have one or two women for 20 men. So yeah, the ratio is not exactly equal. But first, each year we have some. It's extremely rare to have only men. And it's really about game design and game development. In game arts, graphics, and even sound, it's less true. I think it's more a cultural thing, which is a shame, because we know that for gamers, the ratio is actually quite equal. We have almost a 50-50 ratio. So why are these fields not as attractive or can be maybe daunting for this population? It's hard to say. I have to admit, when you are in a niche like ALT control, is actually great for women and actually any minorities in general, because as we are a really small community of developers, I won't say everyone knows everyone, but you know, people knows each other, and it's actually very arty and weird, and so you don't suffer from the usual problems you can have in other sphere of society. So I think it's not exactly an answer, but developing ALT control in the game sector in general can actually be appealing, but in the sense as protecting for people that could be afraid of being marginalized because they are part of a minority, whether it's because it's related on gender or race, etc.
Right. I have a follow-up question, actually two. So the first one is from our Zoom, and they're asking, do you think that there are some games, or would you think that developing games specific for women would actually help the growth of this, of more women getting involved?
So it's a complicated question in the sense that there are potential positive and negative outcomes to this. The positive one, of course, is to have to actually understand, think about specific problems or difficulties that can be related to women. The problem is that it's an approach that basically consists in sectorizing, marginalizing even more people. So it's a really subtle type of design to do. It's really hard to do. I don't have a concrete answer to give to this. I can only raise the pros and cons for this. I think if some people does it, it's good, definitely. But meanwhile, we have to be careful to not make it the only available options of gaming for women. We need to have options for gaming that are targeting everyone, and some may be more specific. And so this can be, this specialized game could be a gateway to traditional gaming.
Yeah.
But having only this could be a problem. But in general, it's a good idea, of course.
Okay, follow-up question is, generally in all games, it seems like there's always a community or communities that are never involved in the games. And I'm being specific with people who have challenges with their sight, maybe challenges with their arms or with their feet. And for me, it feels like ALT control seems like it's making those, I don't want to call them disabilities, but challenges, exclude these communities even more. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, ALT control is very related to accessibility field, to the accessibility field. It's interesting as a topic. So it's not my specialty. I know some people that are specialized in accessibility because in addition of traditional game design skills, you also have to know your audience quite well and also have basis in, physiology in general, or at least biology, to understand how these people will be able to play. But there are two things I can say about this. The first one is, I think you're right to not talk about disabilities, not to make a politically correct answer, but because actually, I think as a designer, it's not your problem to know why a person will play with one hand. Maybe it's because they are missing the other hand. Maybe that's because they just want to play with one hand on that moment. And I think it's a healthy way for a designer to think about accessibility in game, to not particularly focus on the specific disabilities, but make a game, make a controller thinking about, yeah, what if people want to play with one hand? We don't care about the reason for why. So I think that's a healthy approach as a designer. The second thing is we have controllers right now on the market that will allow people with challenges to play a game the regular way. But what's missing is or games that would actually play with specificities of these people. One very common example is how people that are blind or cannot see very well usually have a sharper hearing, and that's something that could be used in a game. So instead of seeing it as these people have challenges and we will make a controller so they can play like other people, maybe making game that would play on their good qualities, on what they can do that other people cannot. And I think this would be very empowering instead of just reminding people that about what they cannot do, play on what they can do that other people can't.
I love that answer. So there's a comment from Calvin, and he says there's a game made by 4 African women called Be Beautiful, made by Usiku Games. So I don't know, Tatiana, you can check it out. It's made here in Kenya.
I'm reading the chat.
Yeah, it's geared towards helping girls with self-esteem and creativity. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, that's really good. There are specific challenges for, especially for girls. Women is a whole other topic, but especially when we at a young age, there are challenges that are specific to genders, I guess. I mean, I don't think it's that controversial to say. It's quite obvious that culturally we face different challenges depending on how society is seeing us. But I'm gonna check it out. Be Beautiful. I'm looking at this right now.
All right. So there's a question about the process that you use to develop your games. It's the last question. It's anonymous, and they're wondering how the pipeline looks like to creating.
That's a really good question. So it depends a bit on the game. Not to say it's always different. There is a kind of a general pipeline, but it depends a lot on if it's a one-shot game. So something I'm making on a really small amount of time, like in few days, maybe, well, few days, 10, 15 days, or if it's something I'm developing for months. If it's something I'm developing for several weeks, I made a YouTube videos that is for free online. It's the last one I made. It's the making of Love Sphinx. It's the first game I showed you, the one with the metallophone and the LED sculpture. Yeah. And this is a full making of the pipeline. But of course, I won't just give you that answer. I can give you general ideas. So, as any design process, it will start with ideation. So ideation, I have the luxury of making kind of the games I want to make. I'm saying kind of course, because if I'm making something that no one will exhibit, it will be a problem. But I have the luxury of making something that is, I can make things that are very arty or very gamey, and I will have different contexts to exhibit them. So for ideation, usually it starts with a constraint or a new design challenge. Right now, I'm living my best life trying to make games that are COVID-19 compatible. I love challenges. So usually, yeah, you start with a challenge, and this constraint will be the base to build your idea. And then it's really important for me to let the ideas simmer, to let it run in the background of my head and do something else. It can be doing something else technical on another installation, or just teaching or whatever. After a few days, few weeks, when the ideas have matured, then it's time to plan the technical parts. And usually I start with 2 prototypes, a prototype that is a gameplay prototype that will allow me to test the core experience. It can be a paper prototype when it's relevant. Usually it involves a bit of development, of course, and a technical prototype, because I also love technical challenges. A lot of my works started with taking a new technology I've never used before,
right,
and trying to do weird stuff that no one did before with it. So usually you have a lot of problems, technical problems when doing this, but that's what I like. I like problems. As a designer, it's a good thing, I guess. And when you have these 2 prototypes, usually it's time for development, and then the exhibit condition will give an orientation to your design. That's the moment where it starts to look like space exhibition, space design, where you will have to think about the mood you're looking for, how the light will be, how the interfaces will be staggered in the room, etc. So it's a bit vague, a vague description, but I think the best is to look at this 5-minute video I did not long ago online. I will share this on my social networks again, and you can have a look at this if you're curious.
Great. So I have a follow-up question for that one.
Sure.
What's your path to commercialization? How do you make this so that it makes money for you?
How do I make money?
No, like generally in alt control, how do you get to the point that you've made your game and you want to make some money out of it?
Yeah.
Do you have examples of games that have commercialized?
So there are games that are commercialized. Of course, mainly the ones using, making a diverted use for standard controllers, because they can afford to be online. So I'm thinking about Joust, Button, Fingal, Bounden. But some developers actually are selling their games online. So they are kind of handmade. So you cannot buy thousands of them, but you can buy some. It's the case for Line Wobbler. And other things like Rotor Ring. It's another game you can buy online. It's one way to make money from alt control. I personally work only with exhibits, so it's closer to interactive art, interactive art way of making money. You know, you make your game. Usually in art residencies, you will have some fees, some per diem, a little allowances that you will have each day that will cover your the thing you have to buy, food, etc. But also give you some money to make the game, and you are paid to exhibit. So then it's as very often in life, a lot about networks. So at the beginning, you usually cannot start by, I don't know anyone who started alt control and earn a living out of it right away. I don't know anyone who did this. It took me 2 years to make it, and it's okay because during those 2 years, I wasn't starving. I was doing other things in my life. I was working as a freelancer. Before that, I was an employee, a traditional junior game designer in the gaming industry, in the game industry. So at the beginning, you do this when you have time, when you can afford to. And with time, you start to, to actually have a network of curators that will offer you regularly to exhibit. From time to time, you have also to apply to art residencies, because what's cool with this circuit, let's say, like the art residency, it will be a cultural place. Most of the time, the first exhibition of the work you do in an art residency will be the vernissage, or also called the finissage, the first exhibition of what you did in the art residency. And the art residency, this place, will also have partners and connections. So they will, it's to their benefit to call other places and say, yeah, this artist did this with us. Would you like to exhibit it? And so on and so on. So it's a virtuous circle. And that's why I would highly suggest people who want to start this to apply to art residencies.
Okay, so we have a question from K1S1 3LO. Yeah, and he asks, how important is a game document and its adoption into other works like animation, comics, etc.? This is from Roy, actually. And can this model work in Kenya?
Okay, so how important is a game design document? Vary, even for ALT control. The first part of the question is really interesting, because usually when we do ALT control, a lot of people will think about it as something you do, in game jam, and in a game jam, and then you move on to something more serious. Like ALT control cannot be serious, which of course is not what I think, because I'm teaching it and making it, it's my whole life. So this is really not what I'm thinking. And yeah, in traditional video game design, you will be told, especially as a student or as a junior, to make game design documents. And often there's this idea that in ALT control, as it is a bit weird and fun, you don't have to. That's bullshit. You really need documentation, especially when you work with someone else. When you work alone, I have to admit it's a whole other story. But I usually work with one other person, mainly because I don't like working alone. I'm a social person. And you know, when you have problems, when you are alone, it's like hell. But when you are with someone else, it's just an adventure. So yeah, I really like working with people. And for that, you need to make the game design documents, but not like 200 pages game design documents, 1 or 2 sheets, and you just share them, especially for the electronics. And this is the transition I can make. Game design document for ALT control also have some specificities as compared to traditional game design documents, in the sense that you will add in it things like the human-computer interaction schematic I showed you. This could be something that would be in a game design document for an ALT control. You will have also how the electronics is working, how is it placed in the installation. You will have sketches of the room or the place or space in which the installation, the ALT control game will be, because it has an influence, of course, on the way the players will play, etc. So yeah, for documentation, it's really important, and it has some specificities as compared to traditional game design. For the second part, I'm not sure to quite understand the second part of the question. It's about the adaptation into other works like animation, comics. Are we talking about the adaptation of ALT control games?
Yes, we are.
Animation, comics? Okay. And that's catching me off guard. No one ever asked me this question before. Yeah, I guess what's interesting in general in fiction is that there are a lot of whether it's comics, animation, movies, or even books, novels, you have plenty of great inspiration in like sci-fi. Oh, for instance, Ready Player One. Okay, yeah. Oh, so that, yeah. Okay, it's not too far from what I'm about to say, Paul. In this type of fiction, especially in science fiction, you have a pool of inspiration that is tremendous. I can give you one example. I'm really into fantastic fiction where the world is really ordinary, but there is just one object that will have weird properties. Like, let's say I have this pen, and when I click it, the gravity will be reversed. Well, there are fictions like this that are really inspiring for me as a designer. I actually made a VR game entirely based on this concept, and this was mainly inspired by science fiction and fantastic fictions coming from series and movies. So yeah, great. Go watch and read comics and watch animations and sci-fi. As an out control designer, it's really important to get inspired by something that is not coming from traditional video game industry.
Okay, so moving from there, just slightly attached question. So in terms of alt control, are there festivals we need to look out for? Do you guys attend Comic-Con? How does that look like?
Yeah, really good question. So I guess my favorite festival, because it's the first one that really gave me a chance to actually exhibit in good conditions, is the Amaze Festival. I'm not saying this because it's
our own partners.
Yeah, but I have to admit, and not only because I'm really grateful for them, but also because it's the exact balance I'm looking for. It's artistic, but not arty in a contemporary art sense. It's not. I don't have anything against contemporary art. I love it, but we have to admit that it's not very accessible, and you often need a lot of previous understanding, previous knowledge to understand a white monochrome and things like this. So the Amaze Festival is gamey enough not to be too much exclusive, not too much elitist in the art sense, but yet very inclined to display, to show, to exhibit artistic games. And that's the perfect balance for me, because they are, this is exactly what alt control is for me. I'm not saying it should be this for everyone, but it's that for me. Something that can have a lot of meaning, be very artistic, but also can be that very funny party game you play with your friends, and that will reinforce your social bonds. So yeah, the Amaze Festival for sure. But there are other festivals, and I can talk about them. There are, so in the UK, there are lots of them. We're talking alt control, so like 2 or 3 of them. I'm thinking about Now Play This in London. Future Play in Edinburgh, I think. I hope I'm not saying something, I'm not making a mistake here, but I think it's in Edinburgh. And Feral Vector. In France, you will have the Indicate Europe in Paris, that has a part dedicated to this kind of controller, the alternative controller games. Of course, the alt control GDC is the place to be, because it's the most famous one. And in the US, you also have Beat Bash in Chicago, and then in you have Amaze. So Amaze Festival is initially in Berlin, but they also do a lot of festivals elsewhere, and especially here in Africa. Actually, my first African exhibit was at the Amaze Johannesburg. So yeah, every Amaze related, the good thing with the Amaze Festival is that you can just look at all the different events they are else organizing or being partners of, and you will have a big list of good festivals. I won't make an exhaustive list of it, but on Shake That Button, the website I told you about, there is a list of events related to alt control and the alt control movement.
Thank you so much for that. We actually had a question for you to share those sources, so thank you for that. We'll end it here. A million thanks, Tatiana. You have been brilliant. It's been such a good workshop. I'll definitely follow you on all social media. Please post them on our chat.
We'll have to.
Before we go for lunch, because I'm sure like most other people who are watching right now, they've seen your bagel controller and are feeling a little hungry. Is it a bagel or a croissant? Like, I'm not sure.
It's a croissant.
It's a croissant.
It's the
c'est
French
bien.
inside me that is.
Pas de
that made this
problème.
illustration.
Merci beaucoup for the session.
Merci à vous.
So we want to thank Alliance Française, the Goethe-Institut, for putting this together, the bus, and of course us at the Aga Khan University for all the support for the entire festival and the workshops that we are having. So in the afternoon, we are going to have Olivier Madiba and South African developer Ivan Greenwood. They'll be sharing their insights and experience with how to set up a successful game development studio from scratch. So you have no idea of how to do this. This is a perfect workshop for you. We really highly recommend it. Do not miss out. Tell your friends, get on WhatsApp, let them know it's happening. So see you in the afternoon. It starts at 1:30 and it's going to be on the Goethe-Institut YouTube. So don't forget, thank you so much, Tatiana, merci. And before you leave,
Thanks
can we take
again.
a selfie?
Yeah, sure, of course.
Yeah, just look pretty on your camera and let's do it.
Okay.
Perfect, I think someone has taken it. Yeah?
Great.
Okay, merci, à bientôt.
Merci à vous. Thanks a lot for your attention. Thanks again.
Don't
Have a
be
nice day.
chérie.
Bye.
Bye. It's